Hi, it's Josh Goldberg here. Welcome back to our channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about something called reaction-seeking abuse. So what do we think about when we think about abuse in relationships? Okay, normally we think about aggressive behavior, we think about verbal abuse, we think about physical abuse, violence, sexual abuse. Today I'm talking about something that is very common. Okay, my wife and I see this type of abuse quite regularly. I've also been into relationships where this type of abuse was happening, and I call it reaction-seeking abuse. So what is reaction-seeking abuse? So when someone has past emotional trauma, these emotions that were created in that trauma are very strong, and even though the person that was involved in the abuse is not talking about these emotions, the emotions are still very strong, which means that they're very powerful and they're very important to the person. And emotions, especially strong emotions, are like any other entity in the universe, in the sense that it tries to survive. It needs to survive. It needs to keep going on. And because these emotions are stored in a person's unconscious mind, what tends to happen is that the person unconsciously will fabricate specific situations in order to keep these strong trauma emotions alive. Okay, so these could be emotions of shame, of guilt, of sadness, of regret, rejection, any form of emotion that was created in the particular abuse that they were involved in the past. Okay, and if it was childhood abuse, the child actually has incorporated these emotions into part of their identity, and this creates the victim mentality, okay, the victimhood mindset. So a very common form of abuse is a reaction-seeking abuse, where a person that has unresolved trauma emotions will fabricate situations that make them out to be the victim in a situation and uses the other person to create this scenario. Okay, so just remember, abuse is any form of behavior that uses, in this case we're talking about relationships, so in any case that uses the other person for some form of self agenda or self usage that the person is gaining from, either consciously or unconsciously, at the other person's expense. So in this case, we're talking about emotional abuse, which is reaction-seeking abuse, which can also be enticing physical abuse, but we're going to talk about that as the video goes on. So an example of this would be fabricating a situation in a conversation where the person feels like that they're being insulted or attacked or criticized when that's not what the other person is doing at all. Okay, so it could be something like, why are you attacking me? Or, I know what you're doing. Or, you always do this to me. Anything that makes the person out to be the victim of some form of attack is reaction-seeking abuse. Or it can even be that projective identification could be used, which is an abusive behavior, which actually turns the other person into a particular character that the person with unresolved trauma needs them to be. So it can be a physical attacker, it can be a verbal attacker, it can be any form of abuse that the person needs to get for themselves to validate the unresolved trauma emotions from the past abuse. Okay, so it could be provoking physical aggression or verbal aggression, and this is done through projective identification, okay, where the unhealed person will project a particular identity onto a person, which will provoke and entice them to act a certain way, and by doing so the individual with the unhealed trauma is able to keep this emotion alive from their past abuse or past trauma. So it's a very tiring and very hurtful form of abuse. You see this also a lot online, where people will generally provoke other people into reacting negatively or to make themselves out to be a victim. Okay, so this is reaction-seeking abuse, where someone with unresolved trauma will either unconsciously or consciously use someone else to validate to themselves that they're a victim, and or whatever unresolved trauma emotions that they have. So in committed relationships, so we're not talking about on the internet now, we're talking about in a vulnerable relationship, this becomes very problematic, because what tends to happen is, and we see this all the time, that the other person that is being provoked to react, they tend to get worn down over time, and they start to get hurt and to take this reaction-seeking behavior personally. It's very tiring, very exhausting, and over time, if the person is using the other person to validate trauma emotions that are not healed yet and to keep themselves as a victim, the other person can get tired and hurt and very worn down. And reacting to this type of reaction-seeking behavior, it only keeps the trauma emotions validated and keeps it alive. So this is not the right way to handle this. But the problem is, in committed relationships where two people are vulnerable to each other, it's natural to react to this type of behavior. It's natural to feel hurt. And the problem is that it does actually validate these emotions if they react to this behavior. And like I said before, it keeps the trauma emotions alive, which is going to be an ongoing abusive situation. So this is where people usually come to us. Okay, like I said, I've been in 2 relationships where I've encountered reaction-seeking abuse, okay, reaction-seeking behaviors, and reaction-seeking communication. And reacting negatively is never the right thing to do. It is the natural thing to do when you're involved with someone emotionally, to react this way. And the reason I think people react negatively is because, like I said, it's the natural thing to do, but also they don't have anything else to employ at this point in time. Okay, when someone is trying to get you to react a certain way, what's natural to do in this case is not the right thing to do. So learning the right skills to deal with reaction-seeking behavior is very important, okay? And that's what my wife and I have developed, okay? We have a very well-proven set of skills to effectively handle reaction-seeking behaviors and reaction-seeking communication. Because people will tend to not feel such a need to react if they have a skill to perform at that point in time rather than reacting negatively, okay? Because you have to do something. When someone is provoking you or trying to get you to react a certain way, you have to do something. You can't just walk away or do nothing, because that you can't exist like that. So you have to do something. So I always say, rather than reacting negatively, act effectively. And the skills that we have put together are very proven. They're very successful in dealing with reaction-seeking behaviors. The other thing that's very important for a person to do that is dealing with reaction-seeking abuse is to heal their emotions from all the times that they were hurt and confused by this type of abusive behavior, okay? Because if the emotions are too strong, it's very hard to employ an effective skill when you always feel like that you need to explode and react, okay? So healing past emotions from this abusive reaction-seeking behavior is very important in being able to go forward in a healthy way. And also, this entails getting out of the victim mindset. Okay, I made a video on the double victim trap, which is a relationship that is comprised of two victims. Okay, this person is a victim of past trauma, and then this person traumatizes that person with their reaction-seeking abuse, and then this person becomes a victim, and then you have two victims. It's a totally dysfunctional relationship. So getting out of the victim mentality of being on the receiving end of this reaction-seeking abuse is very important to be able to get up and to act effectively and to protect yourself from being used by this type of abusive behavior, and not keeping it going. Okay, because like I said, reacting negatively to reaction-seeking behavior is the exact thing that keeps their trauma emotions alive and validated, so it's not going to ever stop. So this is reaction-seeking abuse. It is very common in relationships. It's also common on the internet. It is very worthwhile to invest in learning these skills on how to deal with reaction-seeking behavior and to stop taking it personally, and to be able to act effectively instead of reacting negatively and feeling bad about it and being stuck in this wheel of hopelessness. So if you have any questions on how to handle reaction-seeking abuse or any other comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content, and we look forward to seeing you in future videos.